What is up, duelists, and welcome back to another video. And today I'm very happy to present one of my favorite, if not my favorite deck in Genesys format at the moment, that I plan to bring some upcoming Genesys tournaments that I'm also probably going to be able to film. So we're going to have gameplay from this deck as well soon. And that is, of course, Radiant Typhoon Runick. How do Runicks work in Genesys format without an extra monster zone to summon your Hugin into? Well, we're going to get into that, but of course you cannot use that effect of the Runick spells to summon the Hugin from the extra monster zone, but still in this particular deck, the Runick spells still have a lot of value, so I'm going to explain that as we go in. It has a very different playstyle from a lot of other modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks. It really plays a lot more like those Runick combo decks from like, I guess 2 years ago at this point, which is why I really like it, and I'm really happy that Genesys format gives me a place to play this kind of deck. I'm going to explain the Radiant Typhoon cards since they are rather new, but all you have to know for now is that they are a deck that revolves around Mystical Space Typhoon and quick play spells in general, so they are predestined for Runicks. Without further ado, let's get into the list. Starting things off with, in my opinion, the best Radiant Typhoon card, Radiant Typhoon Crocea. What this card says is if a quick play spell is activated, you can summon this card from your hand, and if it's normal or special summoned, you can add a Radiant Typhoon card and or a Mystical Space Typhoon from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So normally you're going to add both. You're going to add a Radiant Typhoon card and Mystical Space Typhoon, so this card on summon searches 2 cards for free. However, it does lock you into wind monsters for the rest of the turn, which is going to be rather important when it comes to the extra deck choices. In the main deck, we are only playing wind monsters, but in the extra deck, this is going to lock you out of some options. An important thing to note about this card is that this does not only include your own quick play spell cards, this includes your opponent's quick plays as well. So if you're playing against a deck that uses quick play spell cards, you can use this as a sort of, not really a hand trap because you're not interrupting the opponent, but you can summon this out on your opponent's first turn and get 2 searches and a body on the board for free to get ahead of your opponent a little bit, which comes up in some matchups. Radiant Typhoon Swen and Radiant Typhoon Eldam are both 3-ofs in this deck, and they both are essentially your starters. How does the small Radiant Typhoon monsters all have the same trait, which is that if you have Mystical Space Typhoon in your graveyard or the opponent controls no spell traps, you can special summon them from your hand, which means that going first, all of these are basically free extenders because the opponent is not going to have any spell traps yet. Going second, it's a little different because you have to like destroy the back row first, but they also work as normal summons. They're pretty similar here. One of them on summon searches a monster, and the other one searches a spell trap, and they both also have the option to search Mystical Space Typhoon instead, which you can do if you have enough engine already. You can search for a Mystical Space Typhoon, which is actually a pretty valuable card in this deck, which I'm going to show you in a second why that is. But yeah, basically, this one is the one that searches monsters, this one is the one that searches spell traps. And there is a spell that can search monsters, so basically whichever one you start with, you can get to both of them and another card. So generating a lot of card advantage right from the bat. Then we have a 1-of Radiant Typhoon Megala. This card works a little bit differently because it doesn't do anything on its own, it doesn't do anything on summon, which is why at the moment it is only a 1-of. However, it does have a very powerful ability, which is that if a Radiant Typhoon quick play spell card or Mystical Space Typhoon is activated, you special summon any Radiant Typhoon from your deck that you don't have at the moment. So anything you don't currently control, you can special summon from your deck. The cool part about this is that this can provide value on your opponent's turn. Like this can get you started on the first turn if you have another card alongside it, but then you can leave it on the board, and then on the opponent's turn, if you activate another Radiant Typhoon quick play spell or MST, you can summon out another Radiant Typhoon monster, which is going to give you further card advantage or disruption. So yeah. I've been considering bumping this number up to just increase the overall consistency of the deck, but it doesn't do anything on its own, and once again, going second, these basically have to be normal summoned if your opponent has back row, so it's a little more difficult if you draw multiple of these to go second with this deck. So at the moment, I've been happy with the 1 copy because it is searchable via these 2, and yeah, that's basically that. So what I'm trying to do basically on the first turn is I'm trying to get these 2 out, and then because once they are on the board and have resolved their effects, they don't provide any further value, I'm trying to make a rank 3 out of these 2. and then keep this one alive, so on the opponent's turn I can summon another monster with it. The Radiant Typhoon boss monsters, so to speak, that I'm playing at the moment are 2 copies of Radiant Typhoon Phonics and 1 copy of Radiant Typhoon Varurun. These both work in a very similar way with only one key difference, which is their on-field effect, but the way they are summoned is the same. Both of them can summon from their hand if a quick play spell is activated. Once again, similar to Corsair, that includes on your opponent's turn, technically. So if your opponent activates a quick play spell, you can summon these out from your hand. That is a trigger effect that triggers after the quick play spell has resolved. And then on the board, they're different because Phonics is way better than Varurun in my opinion, which is why I'm playing 2 copies of this. It's on the board if a quick play spell is activated. Once again, this is a trigger effect, so after a quick play spell has resolved on the field, you can target up to 2 cards your opponent controls, shuffle them into the deck. So a very powerful form of removal in this deck, especially considering how I'm playing Runic cards in this deck, so we don't always have a battle phase. Whereas this one is also good, but not quite as impactful, I think. But it's basically, if your opponent activates a monster effect while you have Mystical Space Typhoon in your grave, you can negate that effect. And then if you have 2 Mystical Space Typhoons in the graveyard, you can even destroy the card, which is neat. It's definitely neat and it's searchable, so it's something you do use almost every game, but it is not as impactful as this. So I'm choosing to run multiple copies of the Phonics because, for example, you don't really have a way to get these back from the banished pile, so if they happen to get banished, I think that is way worse to happen to your Phonics than it is to happen to your Varurun. Also, sometimes, because these are both level 9s, you're going to overlay these into rank 9s. And some rank 9s that I'm playing only detach 1 card, which is why I think sometimes it's important to have all 3 in rotation, so that if I overlay 2 for a rank 9, I can detach this one, and then have these 2 in the graveyard again to bring them back, because they both also have an effect to summon themselves back from the graveyard, which is a Mystical Space Typhoon needs to be activated, basically. So if any quick play spell is activated, you can summon them from your hand. If a Mystical Space Typhoon is activated, you can even summon them back from your graveyard, which is another reason why Mystical Space Typhoon is an important card in this deck, because not only does it destroy spell traps, it also brings back all the big monsters from the graveyard, essentially. So this is basically going to be one of your main payoffs in this engine, is getting these 2 into rotation, being able to negate monster effects and shuffle back cards into the deck, and then have a great amount of recursion from these. So this is the Radiant Typhoon monsters. As you can see, I feel like there's very high card quality here. Like almost all of these cards either have insane Grand Game potential or create a lot of card advantage on summon. I do play triple MST in this deck. I've seen people play less because, of course, it is highly searchable. In my opinion, Mystical Space Typhoon is even a good draw in this deck, and I'll get into why that is. Even if you're playing against a deck that doesn't have any back row, I think Mystical Space Typhoon is a very valuable card to have. First and foremost, because this deck really wants quick play spell cards that can be activated at any time, and since Mystical Space Typhoon can target your own cards, that is the case here. We can basically activate MST almost every time. And that is important because sometimes all I care about is being able to trigger some of these effects. But most importantly, all of the Radiant Typhoon quick play spells have an effect that they reset themselves if they get destroyed by specifically Mystical Space Typhoon. So what you can do if you have a Mystical Space Typhoon and any of the other Radiant Typhoon quick play spells is you can just chain Mystical Space Typhoon to your quick play spell, destroy it, and then it'll reset itself, so you can use it again on the opponent's next turn, which is pretty cute in a lot of situations, because you can just basically decide, hey, would I rather have the Mystical Space Typhoon itself, or would I rather reset one of these cards to use them again on the next turn, which is quite nice. Radiant Typhoon Chant is the first one that we're going to play. It is a Rhoda, basically. It's a quick play spell. All of the quick play spells also have the ability that you can choose whether you activate their first effect or you activate the effect to add Mystical Space Typhoon from deck or graveyard to their hand. And you can use each effect once per turn. So if you happen to draw 2 of the same, you can activate the first effect and the second effect in the same turn. So drawing double necessarily isn't bad because you can just search a Mystical Space Typhoon. Chant searches a level 4 or lower Radiant Typhoon monster, so essentially this is the one that bridges Swen into Eldam, or it searches any of the small ones to begin with. And then we have Radiant Typhoon Vision. This is a card that anyone who's been playing Genesys format should be very familiar with, and even in Advanced Constructed this card is seeing some play. This is basically a trade-in for quick play spell cards, so draw 2 cards and then you have to discard a Radiant Typhoon card or a Quick Play spell. Otherwise, if you don't have it, you have to discard your hands, kind of like Allure of Darkness in that sense, which is amazing. Of course, it's gonna discard the big guys into the graveyard sometimes, because then they can summon out for free when you use a Mystical Space Typhoon, which is also another reason why I've upped it up to 2 copies of Phonics, because I felt like drawing it was pretty nice and I was able to discard it for free. Just in general, cycling through your deck, finding your runic spells, also discarding runic spells and then shuffling them back into the deck with Runic Fountain is also free plus, basically. And if you ever happen to run into a spot where you have a Mystical Space Typhoon in your hand and you don't want it right now, you can discard it. Radiant Typhoon Manifestation, in my opinion, is the worst out of the Radiant Typhoon quick play spells. It's send a Radiant Typhoon monster from your deck to the graveyard or add Mystical Space Typhoon. This one is a 3 of, in my opinion, still at the moment, because like I said earlier, this deck really wants to be able to activate a quick play spell at any time. And the Radiant Typhoon's quick play spells themselves are the best ones at doing that. This is a card that you can basically always activate to either just add Mystical Space Typhoon or send one of these 2 if you don't have them yet. So this is how I use this card, basically. If I don't have one of these 2, I send them. If I already have access to these 2 or I don't need them at the moment, I will always use this one to just search MST. But it's mainly here, so you have a quick play spell card that you can activate at any time to trigger this, to trigger Megala, or to trigger Phonics' effect on the field. And worst case, it gets you an MST, which basically MST is a revive for these cards. 1 copy of Radiant Typhoon Mandate, which is a pretty neat card, because this card gives you recycling with all of your Radiant Typhoon quick play spells, so you don't run out. It's a continuous trap, once per turn. Target 3 quick play spells in your graveyard, including a Radiant Typhoon card, and then you shuffle all of them into the deck, draw a card, and you also have all wind monsters you currently control gain 100 attack this turn. Which is pretty nice, but it's not the only thing that it offers, because it actually is, it's the reason why MST now negates. Once per chain, when Mystical Space Typhoon is activated, you can target a face-up card your opponent controls, negate its effects. If this card is sent, if it resets itself if you destroy it with Mystical Space Typhoon. But basically, if you have these 2 on the field, if your opponent activates even a spell card, you can chain Mystical Space Typhoon, and if your opponent doesn't have a response, you can chain this to negate the effects of a face-up card, and that is once per chain. So having multiple MSTs with this card around is not actually a bad thing. So with this card, yes, MST actually negates now. We've finally reached that point. But it's quite solid if you can set this up. You can obviously search this with the one of these 2. I always forget which one is it. You can search it with Swen, or you can search it with Crocia. If you can afford to. Basically, I will prioritize getting my engine together, but trying to set this up on the first turn if you have sufficient engine is really, really nice, because it gives you recursion, it gives you card advantage, and it makes your MSTs pretty broken, by the way. Like, imagine activating a Mystical Space Typhoon to negate one of your opponent's spell cards, essentially, destroy another one, and then also bring back these 2 from the graveyard, or trigger their field effects to shuffle cards into the deck, or whatever. It's really nice. So these cards really, even though I'm about to show you some runic cards, these cards really are the star of the show in this deck. They are really, really good. And the reason why I'm putting runic into this deck is because I want quick play spells that I can activate at any time. And so this is why I've also changed the list a little bit from what's been floating around the internet. Like, people have been messing around with the combination of Radiant Typhoon and runic, but I'm playing a smaller runic package, because I really just care about the runics being quick play spells that you can activate at any time. That's the most important thing about these. So we're playing 3-tip, which obviously, I mean, it's always the best runic, but it's especially true in this deck because you can always activate it, and that is the best part about it. And this might be surprising, but this is also the reason why I'm playing 3 runic slumbers, which technically this is one of the weaker runics in Genesys format, because you cannot use the effect to summon. But really, what I care about with this card is being able to activate it basically at any point, as long as there's a monster on the field, right? And so this is what I can use to trigger all of these effects whenever I want. And on top of that, banish 3 cards off the top of my opponent's deck. And this is also why I've cut down Freezing Curses, Flashing Fire, and Destruction to 1 copy each to save on some space in the deck. and basically just have the runic tip be a very solid toolbox, because I just found myself, especially like I don't want to rely on these being the way to get my engine going, because they are situational. Going first, because you cannot summon Hugin in Genesys format, you cannot activate them. Unless your opponent has some turn 0 plays, but in Genesys those are not as common. So going first, these are basically just non-engine that you cannot use, which is why I have cut down on them a decent amount. And because we're only playing 9 Runicks, I'm also only playing 1 Fountain. We cannot search it with Hugin, but still I felt like 1 was fine, because I don't really want to draw it. I want to search it with Tip if I can afford to. If I ever draw 2 Runicks, including Tip, I will search my Fountain. And if not, then I will just Tip search for either Slumber or one of these, and then just have multiple quick plays that I can activate that have a decently high quality. I don't want to be stuck with a Runic Fountain in my hand, but no access to any runic quick play spells. I think that was one of the worst things that could happen in this deck. And also, deck space here is pretty tight, because I've chosen to play a pretty big Radiant Typhoon package, which in my opinion is the best way to play the deck at the moment. So I've been liking this as just like good quality quick play spells that you can usually activate at any time, and if you ever happen to draw 2 of them, you can get the Fountain going, and that'll significantly increase the quality of future Runicks that you activate. And no battle phase isn't really a problem in this deck, because it's a very control-y, very grindy deck, and Phonics gives you amazing removal even if you can't run over things by battle. This is 36 cards. And none of this is any points. This is 0 points on the table right now. So I'm going to show you what I'm doing with my 100 points at the moment, but I also want to discuss some other options that you have. So at the moment, because it's a pretty high engine deck, I have chosen to play 3 copies of Pot of Greed for 90 points, which is obviously an amazing card. We don't have to discuss why Pot of Greed is amazing. This deck can be weak into Droll and Lockbird a little bit. However, I will say a lot of the quick play spells you can activate in your draw phase to play around Droll and Lockbird, but there are a couple of searches that you want to do in your main phase, like for example Crocia, Swen, Eldam. Those are searches that you kind of have to make in your main phase. So there's no real way around like Droll and Lockbird sometimes. But like I said, this is on the opponent's turn as well, so like you can hold it in hand if you get drolled. But Pot of Greed is another card that plays into Droll a little bit more. However, I think the risk is worth taking with Pot of Greed at the moment. Another card that, if this deck happens to get some points in the future, because it's like decent, it's a good deck and people are playing it, so I could see some of the Radiant Typhoon cards getting some points eventually. And then you might not be able to afford Pot of Greed anymore. So at the moment, I am using a 1 copy of Mirage of Nightmare for 10 points. Which is a card that, of course, hasn't seen play in a long time because it's been banned forever. In Genesys format, it is only 10 points, and there isn't really any deck using it at the moment. I think if there is a deck that can make good use of it, I think it's this deck. This card says, during the opponent's standby phase, you draw until you have 4 cards in hand, and then in your next standby phase, you have to discard randomly the same amount of cards that you drew. So what you do, essentially, in the deck that is full of Mystical Space Typhoons, is you draw until you have 4 cards in hand, and usually this deck can empty its own hand pretty efficiently, so you're going to draw 4 cards, and then you're going to self-MST it on your opponent's turn, which is also going to trigger some of your cards because you've activated a Mystical Space Typhoon, and it's going to basically remove the drawback during the next standby phase for you to discard. So if this deck happens to get a point increase somewhere, then you could choose to cut the Pot of Greeds, which are 90 points, and then maybe put some points into your engine, and then also play more Mirage of Nightmare. This is a card I'm trying out at the moment. It's amazing going first if you ever pull it off. It is worse going second, of course, because it's pretty slow, but even going second, if you manage to get into a grind game and resolve this card, it can really be a game changer. So I've been liking the 1 copy, but of course, additional copies of it are an option. So this is the main deck, but I'm trying to show you some options that I was considering in terms of the points. So I think 10 points for Mirage of Nightmare is a pretty sweet deal for this deck. Forbidden Droplet, one of the best quick play spells in the format. This is 10 points as well. So if you ever want to cut some engine and cut the Pot of Greeds and play more high quality quick play spells, Forbidden Droplet would be an option. And if you ever find yourself losing to Droll and Lockbird too often, Cult by the Grave, this is one of the decks that can actually, I think, afford to play it. It is a 20-point card, so putting 60 points into Cult by the Graves is pretty hefty. But I've considered playing a split of like 3 Cult by the Grave, 3 Mirage of Nightmare for 90 points, for example, and you could still fit a Droplet. You can rearrange this however you want. You could play 2 Pot of Greed, and 2 Called by the Grave, for example, or whatever. Like these are the cards that I'm currently considering putting all the points into in this deck. So just wanted to mention more copies of Mirage of Nightmare, Called by the Grave, and Forbidden Droplet as options here. And you can basically, I think you can split this up however you like. I think all 3 of these have pretty good value in this deck. Called by the Grave, once again, being a quick play spell that you can almost always activate, but also being a counter to Droll Lockbird, and so on and so forth. You know, so I do think if you want to cut the Pot of Greeds, then there's a couple of other very strong options. But yes, at the moment I've been really liking this split. Okay, extra deck. You are wind locked sometimes, so we're playing some of the wind exceed monsters in duplicates that are really good. Totem Bird and Cicada King are by far the best wind rank 3s. This is a spell trap negate, and this one covers monster effects. So this is what you will overlay your Eldam and Swen almost all the time into, is either going to be Totem Bird or Cicada King, depending on the matchup or depending on what you're scared of. You know, if you're scared of a Cosmic Cyclone on your Runic Fountain or whatever, you can go for Totem Bird. These are nice. I'm playing 1 Xyz Armor Torpedo. This card is just detach 1 to draw a card. Detach both materials to draw a card, rather. So because Eldam and Swen don't lock you yet, so if you ever feel like drawing a card and getting a 2500 beat stick out of it, Armor Torpedo can do that. Breaksword is just a generic rank 3 removal for everything, so that's the rank 3 package. Then we've got a Dragonlark Perrin, which is a little bit of a weird one. It's not that good of a card, but it is one of the few rank 6 wind monsters that's actually useful. So if you ever have 2 Crozias on the board, which can happen if you resolve 1 going second on the first turn of your opponent and then 1 on your turn or something like that, you know, you can make this. It can't be destroyed by battle or card effects while a monster other than this card is face up on the field, and that was special summoned from the graveyard, and during the standby phase, you can detach a material from it and revive a level 5 or lower monster from your graveyard, which is neat because you can generate more card advantage by reviving either Eldam or Swen, or you can put a Megala back onto the board that's in your graveyard because it is a 1-of, of course. So it happens rarely that this comes up, but just so you have something to overlay 2 Crozias into, it's here. Also, an Evolzar Lars, if you ever happen to have 2 level 6s that and you're not locked into wind at the moment, then you can make a Lars, which is a pretty powerful rank 6. Rank 9s, which are the most important ones in my opinion, next to the rank 3s, because your Phonics and your Varurun are level 9, and they come back for free from the graveyard, so why wouldn't you make a rank 9 with them? The most important one in my opinion is Phantom Fortress Enter Blathnir, which is a rank 9, basically Evil Swarm Ouroboros. You know, you can detach 1 to activate 1 of these effects, either banish a card your opponent controls, banish a random card from their hand, or banish a card from their graveyard, which is pretty nice, actually. Also, you can banish the top card of the opponent's deck, but I haven't really used that yet. Overlaying 2 level 9s into a hand rip or another banish from the board is quite nice, and it also gives this deck graveyard interruption. So, and you're never locked out of it because it's a wind monster. This card's pretty good in this deck. I've considered playing 2 even. And then the rest is just generic rank 9 toolbox. K9 Werewolf, pretty powerful card actually, even if you hard make it. If you're not locked into wind monsters, pretty strong. We have the 2 generators, Leviathan and Jormungandr. These are pretty good. Generator plays multiple of these for a good reason, but essentially this thing it's kind of a cracked endboard piece actually, if you really think about it. It's also removal, which is double, which is super valuable in a Runic deck. But basically, you tribute this card and then you summon this, and you attach cards from the field or graveyard to it up to the number of materials that this card had. So you tribute it, and then you summon this and attach your opponent's board to it, basically, because this had 2 materials, you can attach 2 cards. Which is pretty sick, actually. And then this is also not too bad, but also, it's not the important part. Like, this is the broken one here. And then the rest is a little bit of a spoiler for the side deck. We have a Mereologic Aggregator, which is technically a rank 9, you could make it, but it's rarely going to be better than these options up here. A Malong and a Garura, which is obviously leading us into the side deck. Which is, I mean, I'm going to start with the Ultimate Slayers because I've showed you these. Ultimate Slayer, really good card in this deck. Removal is very important in a Runic deck, and gives you card advantage while you're at it, which is neat. We play 3 Vados, one of my favorite hand traps in Genesys format at the moment. This is obviously subject to change depending on the next point update, but at the moment I think Vados is a phenomenal card, hitting Vanquish Soul on their field spell, and a lot of other decks that are reliant on their field spell as well. You know, it's decent. It's good against Generator, and so many other decks that currently revolve around their field spell. I'm not main decking it because I don't really like. I think in some decks you can actually main it, like Vanquish Soul can main deck this card, because in Vanquish Soul you don't care that much about blowing up your own field spell and giving it to the opponent and then running it over to basically Darkhold the board. In this deck, I don't want to destroy my own Runic Fountain. I only play 1 and I can't summon a Gary to get it back, so I don't want to main it. I only want to play it against decks that I know have quick play spells. Rescue Aces. I'm a big fan of the Rescue Ace cards. I'm trying to find my my Crocia going second immediately if my opponent plays quick play spells. I also want to discard Phonix and Varuun to the graveyard for free. It's pretty neat. Some filtering, some card advantage. Level 6 actually matters in this deck because you can make Lars. And yeah, it's pretty neat. 2 Lava Golems. You have to be careful with Lava Golem, and I'm not sure if I'm convinced by this card yet, because going second, if your opponent has not only monsters but also spell traps, giving up your normal summon can be rough, because you obviously you cannot special summon your Swen and your Eldam when your opponent has back row, so you are a little more normal summon reliant at the moment. While I've really liked Lava Golem in general in Genesys format, in this deck I'm not sure if this is the best use of these 2 slots here. If you have a better idea, like Dark Ruler for example is something I've been considering over the Lava Golems, then I could see that for sure. And then 3 Cosmics, of course. I mean, quick play spell card, super versatile, and even in a deck that has like infinite copies of Mystical Space Typhoon, I still think it's valuable to play another one of these, just because their quick play is super easy to activate. This could be Cosmic or Twin Twister. I think that's both fine. But yeah, I think there's definitely still an argument to play these even in this deck. So yeah, an example first turn, or like just so you get an understanding of how this deck works. I can show you what you would do with like Swen, Eldam, and let's say a Runic tip, like one of these 2 in Runic tip. So if you have no monsters, you are going to special summon out Swen, which is going to give you access to any spell trap. And in most cases, if you don't have multiple engine cards, this is going to be Radiant Typhoon Chant, which is going to search for another Radiant Typhoon monster, and that's in this case going to be Eldam, and then Eldam searches for any Radiant Typhoon monster, in which case, if you don't have it, it's usually Crocia. Now these two can already make a Totem Bird or a Cicada King, or you can draw a card here with Armor Torpedo. All 3 of these are viable options, so this is what you're gonna make out of these. And if you have another Radiant Typhoon spell in your hand, you could also search the Megala here, which is technically better than searching a Crocia. But since I said we're going to have just Runic Tip, we're going to search the Crocia. So you're going to activate Runic Tip. In this instance, if you have more Runic spells in hand, of course you're going to search Runic Fountain. But just assuming you don't, you're going to search for one of your 4 utility Runicks. Banish a random card off your opponent's deck, and then you can trigger the Crocia because the quick play spell was activated, summon itself from the hand, activate the effect to search for a Radiant Typhoon card and a Mystical Space Typhoon, which in this case I would say is probably the Phonix. And so once you basically get all of this out of 2 cards, which is going to be usually I make the Spell Trap negate on the first turn, and I search the Slumber so that I can activate it at any time. You're going to have 3 other cards in hand plus these 3, so you're in 6 cards in hand at the moment. Once the Slumber is activated, you can summon the Phonix out from your hand for free, and then once the Mystical Space Typhoon is activated, this shuffles 2 cards into the deck, which is pretty nice considering. And of course, this changes and becomes more powerful if you have more quick play spells in your hand, because then, you know, you can also go for Megala, and then Megala is going to summon more from your deck on the opponent's turn, and so on and so forth. And the really cool thing is, if you hard draw MSTs, I very often use them to destroy stuff like Chant or Vision on my own turn to reset them, so I have more quick plays to activate on my opponent's turn to generate more card advantage, and so on and so forth. So just an idea of how much card advantage this deck can generate with just 1 or 2 cards. And you notice that the Runicks here, in this case, you don't rely on the Runic draws here to generate a bunch of card advantage or a bunch of draws, which is why I've chosen to keep the Runic engine a little bit smaller, because I think the Radiant Typhoon cards already do a pretty good job at outgrinding the opponent. I don't think it's necessary to resolve Fountain to draw a bunch of cards in this deck, because the Radiant Typhoon cards basically print card advantage. So all the Runicks are here for is just a bunch of quick play spells you can activate at any time that offer some removal in certain situations, because Tip is so versatile. So yeah, I'm gonna be able to film some gameplay with this deck soon. My locals is gonna start doing Genesys, I think next week. So I'm really excited to bring you some gameplay with this deck as well. Until then, let me know what you think of this deck. Let me know what you've been playing in Genesys format. If you liked the video, let me know. Leave a comment, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.